Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Bullet to the Head. This is one I was really looking forward to. I'm a huge Stallone fan. It had an interesting supporting cast, not to mention the return of Walter Hill in the director's seat. The last time I saw a movie of his was, God, Undisputed? And that was like 10 years ago, so this was sort of a big deal to me. Then I saw the trailer and it looked amazing. Now what's funny is Arnold Schwarzenegger just recently came out with a comeback movie of his own, The Last Stand, and the trailer for that film didn't seem very good, but I thought the movie itself was awesome. And now the trailer for Bullet to the Head looked awesome, but the movie itself wasn't very good. Now, this is going to be difficult to review because almost everything I have to say about it is bad, but I can't say that I really disliked the movie either. It's just, I don't know, it's not quite okay, but it's not mediocre either. It's somewhere in between there. The first problem with it is it has a very contrived story. Now, based on the trailers, I presumed the plot would be that Stallone was a hitman who he was betrayed by his employer who, after failing to kill Stallone, they kidnap his daughter, so Stallone has to reluctantly team up with this cop who's trying to catch these bad guys too in order to save her. I could have bought that plot, but the real story has very little to do with the daughter, actually. The whole thing is Stallone and his partner, they kill some scumbag, but Stallone can't bring himself to kill the hooker who just happened to be with this guy, so for that reason, presumably they were betrayed by the employer, who's played by Mr. Echo, although there's a bunch of villains in that same group, so I'm very much simplifying it. I don't remember the actor's name, but I just know him as Mr. Echo from Lost. And they send their chief enforcer, played by Jason Momoa, who is known primarily for being Conan in the Conan the Barbarian remake, to kill both Stallone and his partner. He kills his partner, but Stallone manages to escape. Now, it turns out the guy that Stallone had killed previously, he used to be a cop, but he was banned from the force because he was dirty, and he's become an even worse criminal since then, which ultimately led to why he was killed. So his old partner is played by Sung Kang. I don't know if I'm remembering that name correctly. Sung Kang, yeah, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. But so Sung Kang comes in from out of town. I don't remember if he was from a different state or a different city. I presume it was just a city. But he comes in to investigate this guy's death, and this leads him to meeting up with Stallone. And he knows that Stallone killed him, but he's more interested in nabbing his employer, so they reluctantly team up. The problem I had with this is I never understood why the cop was involved in this story. You don't get the impression that he liked his partner, whereas Stallone obviously was very fond of his. Pretty much the character, Taylor Kwan, openly admits that this guy was an asshole. But so I never understood why he was staying there, especially when it was obvious that the local police force had no interest in having him there. They pull the same "this is our town" crap that you see in all of these movies. But then at the same time, if he did feel any remorse or sadness for this guy, he would not be teaming up with the dude who killed him, so that just didn't really make a lot of sense. And the way they decide to team up is just really forced too. At first, Stallone wants nothing to do with him, but then he sees the bad guy stalking this cop, and he feels like he has to save them. So you could argue that they're just goes to show that Stallone isn't a bad guy, and they're constantly alluding to the fact that sometimes you got to do what's right. But the characterizations are so poor that it just never is explained thoroughly enough. So that's a bad start. Just the whole setup is very difficult to swallow, and the story develops in a very conventional way. Really, there's no plot twists. Everything you know about the movie you can deduce within the first 20-30 minutes, from who the main bad guy will be, why they're doing what they're doing, and there's not a single surprise. But really, what the primary content is The cop feels like he has to stop Stallone, even though he does respect him to an extent. And Stallone's saying, you can't worry about me. We just have to take care of the main problem. And that does get old really fast. Then the whole thing with the daughter, that doesn't come into play until the end, where the villains discover her existence and decide to capture her, and that's really the third act. So for the most part, I actually could have bought the story based on what I presumed the movie would look like. I'm not sure how to explain this. Based on the trailers, I thought the visual style was really unique. It seemed like The Expendables had a baby with Cobra, one of the most underrated Stallone films. I mean, he takes on an army of serial killers. That is the best plot of all time ever. And it seemed like there was some real weird colors going on in the trailer, just in terms of the style. And I figured, maybe like Cobra, this would be some sort of alternate reality where that doesn't quite fit the rules of actual logic. But it's not. For the most part, the direction was very minimalist. Whenever there is an attempt at style, it's really distracting, like these weird flash cuts, or like the first scene is in black and white, even though based on Stallone's speech, it's taking place in the present and he's flashing back to the rest of it, but then the flashbacks are all in normal color. There isn't anything atmospheric, which once again I was thinking they do based on the trailers. It just seems like it takes place in the normal world, but they're just ignoring all traces of logic. So that didn't quite work. Now, had this taken place in Cobra's world, I would have been totally fine with that. But it doesn't, so that's too bad. What's weird is the movie isn't poorly paced. At no point was I ever impatient with it. I never was bored. But at the same time, I can't remember a whole lot of action sequences. For the most part, they're very one-sided. Either Stallone or Jason Momoa will come in and shoot people or beat the hell out of them, but there's very little actual mutual shootout sequences, and there's no car chases, or, there's a few hand-to-hand fight scenes, but I really no more than 3 or 4, and they're generally pretty short. So I'm trying to remember what exactly happened in this. For the most part, it's just the two main characters bickering, and the problem is that it's very typical. Stallone's the grizzled veteran, and the Sung Kang is the young guy who's much more competent when it comes to technology and stuff like that. But for the most part, he's useless when compared to Stallone. Stallone's always having to save his ass, and the movie's always having Stallone show him up in some way, shape, or form. Like, Sung Kang would say something that might be kind of cool, but then Stallone would say something even cooler, and that's pretty much that's pretty much their whole dynamic right there. And while sometimes, the dialogue is pretty amusing, it's also trying way too hard to be witty or badass. At least they're trying in that regard, but it doesn't quite work in its favor. But at the same time, as I said, I was never bored, and I believe that Stallone and actually the rest of the cast definitely carry this movie. Stallone, people like to say he's a bad actor. I don't agree. Even though, he's delivered some bad performances. I'm kind of quoting off a website called Teleport City, which is an awesome website, by the way. They're my favorite when it comes to written reviews. I remember one review said that he's not a bad actor, he's a limited actor. But within those limitations, he can do some really good work. And by this point in his career, he's played this kind of role many times before, and he knows how to do it, and he does it masterfully. Whenever he wants a scene to be more lighthearted and funny, usually the scene is fairly lighthearted and funny, just because of his delivery. And whenever he wants to be kind of scary and intense, you buy it. Stallone's supposed to be pretty short in real life, but he has a lot of presence, and whenever he's on screen, even when he's like 60-something years old now, you definitely buy him as a badass. And then even some of the more heartwarming scenes, or where he's sad about something, you can definitely feel it, even though it's pretty understated. And that's very difficult to do, especially when I think of Stallone at his worst. Usually he's just way too over the top, and it doesn't work out for him like it does for, let's say, Arnold Schwarzenegger. But when he's more reined in, I think he's great, and he's great in this movie, and I really enjoyed watching him. And Sung Kang's a little more difficult to describe because I didn't like what they do with the character. But he has a lot of charm and charisma, and I thought it would be interesting to see him play off of Stallone because both have very different styles of acting, but it's more just one-sided. Stallone's awesome, and Sung Kang's almost the butt monkey of this movie. And I didn't really feel like he had that action movie edge. I think Jet Li could have played this kind of role better because, Jet Li, once again, he might be short and scrawny looking, but he has the presence of a badass. This guy doesn't quite have that, which is weird because I thought he was pretty awesome in Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, and his acting isn't bad here. I just felt maybe he was a bit too young for this part, but then again, it's also how he was written, so it's difficult to really describe his acting. The Jason Momoa, I thought, made a pretty good villain. He's definitely menacing, and I like what they do with him. At first, he's just sort of bland, typical movie villain, but as the movie goes on, he shows more of a personality. And even though, once again, his characterization was very thin, they didn't explore him enough for him to be really interesting. I thought he made a worthy villain. The guy Mr. Echo, he's technically the top villain. He's kind of doing the same thing he did in Killer Elite, but a lot hammier, and I didn't think it worked out quite as well. I didn't dislike him, but I didn't particularly like him either. Christian Slater has a small role, and he's a lot of fun, though. It was nice seeing him again. But the cast in general, I thought, did a solid job. What else can I say? I guess maybe just talking a little bit about the action itself. Because it's so one-sided, there isn't a whole lot in terms of style. Whereas with The Last Stand, it was just framed really well and edited really well. The action moves pretty fast when it does happen, but for the most part, it just emphasizes the gore. And yeah, that's another thing about this movie. It is definitely hardcore. There's a lot of violence and a lot of nudity, and I have no complaints there. But other than maybe the last action scene where Jason Momoa and Sylvester Stallone fight with axes, none of the action sequences really stood out. And what's weird is they kind of stressed Sung Kang being some sort of martial artist based on the trailers. He only has one hand-to-hand fight scene, so that was sort of wasted, but it was more Stallone's movie anyway. But the last fight scene was pretty cool. Nothing spectacular, but once again, considering how old Stallone is, it moved pretty well. But really, honestly, this movie was underwhelming. I'm not going to remember it. In fact, I just got out of seeing it right now, and I wanted to make this video just so I could remember something about it. But it's harmless, but unremarkable, and I think it's better as a rental than as going to the theaters and seeing it. I don't really regret seeing it in theaters, but it takes a lot for me to regret something. Like, I regret seeing that Haunted House parody, but even Texas Chainsaw 3D, which I thought was worse than this, I don't regret it because it's my kind of movie, and I always like talking about these types of films. Plus, theaters always provide the best experiences when it comes to these kinds of films. But if you're not like me and feel like you have to see everything, I just say wait till it comes out on DVD. It would make a solid rental at best, but it's not worth checking out in theaters. Go see The Last Stand, though. That movie deserves more attention, damn it. So that is all. Once again, March is coming up, and I plan on reviewing a franchise in terms of written reviews. Please check the link in my description and vote which one you want to see me cover. The options are Kickboxer, Best of the Best, American Ninja, Howling Puppet Master, and Children of the Corn. So I'd be really grateful if you did all of that. I did not do a written review for this, but God, it's been a long time since I did a written review of anything, so I don't even know what the last one I did was. But be sure to follow me on Twitter, where I'll release updates on critiquing the critics and the status of that. Check out my website, of course, and that is all. I'll see you guys later.